Part 6. Man at the Top of the Food Chain. Author, Xionglang Guo. Chapter 51. Li Anping looked in the direction of Black Dragon Mountain, where a fire was rising into the sky, and the red flame dyed the clouds red. Large areas of fog were also dispersed. Thick black smoke shot straight into the sky. Apparently there was a big fire going on there. Fire, coincidence, or... Li Anping thought of this and suddenly glanced at Ye Wenbin beside him. Then, with the other party's blank eyes, he cut his neck with a palm, knocking Ye Wenbin unconscious. Anyway, let's go take a look first. Li Anping got out of the car, looked at the direction of the fire and rushed towards Black Dragon Mountain. He walked very fast, his eyes fixed on the direction of the fire. After memorizing the direction in his heart, he smelled the smoke in his nose and heard the sound in his ears. The trees and fog could not stop him at all. In one step, he was already more than 10 meters away. Cave, 10 minutes ago. Kano waved his hand at Mo Kyuyan, and Mo Kyuyan felt a huge force coming, like a big hammer hitting his chest, knocking him back more than 10 steps. He didn't stop until he vomited a mouthful of blood. Mo Kyuyan looked at the other party in disbelief, and the situation just now flashed through his mind. He didn't understand how the other party attacked him. He didn't see the weapon, Kano didn't get close to him, and he didn't even touch him with his hands. Just like he had knocked Suomi away just now, he waved his hand and hit him. It's Nian Chi. When Kano waved his hand, he just hit me with Nian Chi. It's very simple, very crude, just like a child's way of squandering his mind energy. Mo Kyuyan was also surprised when he looked at the other party's endless thoughts that kept coming out as if there was no limit. But what's going on with this level of Nian Chi? This is already the amount of energy that can be achieved at the 4th level. Could it be that he... There was also a hint of panic in Mo Kyuyan's eyes. But Kano waved his hand nonchalantly, and his energy was like countless hands, hitting Mo Kyuyan here and there. Mo Kyuyan was then hit by Kano like a ball. Faced with this kind of attack, Mo Kyuyan could only defend passively for a while. He curled up his body as much as possible and covered his body with his mind energy. Every time Kano's mind energy came up, he would use his mind energy in advance. Chi gathers in the area to be struck. So although it looked like he was beaten badly by one side, apart from the first punch, Mo Kyuyan was not seriously injured by the subsequent attacks. Even in the face of the opponent's overwhelming power of thought, when he was completely at a disadvantage and passively beaten, Mo Kyuyan still had no intention of giving up and escaping. He was still calmly analyzing the opponent's situation and looking for opportunities to win. Defended, after all, it was a pure mental attack. Although the amount was very large, my mental energy was not enough to evenly cover my whole body to defend him. However, as long as I predict the route of his attack in advance, I can use my mental energy to gather it. Block. After all, Kano was just an ordinary person before and lacked the experience of fighting with ability users. I can beat him. Thinking of this, Mo Kyuyan resisted Kano's mental energy blow while skillfully using the force of the opponent's blow to get closer to Kano. But just as he was getting closer to the other party, Kano stopped. Mo Kyuyan looked at Kano warily, wondering what the other person's plan was. If Kano really reaches the 4th energy level, he must be killed before he masters the ability, but my ability must be close to be useful. Find a way to get close to him. But at this moment, he saw Kano suddenly tilt his neck, and said slowly, "It seems that I can't kill you with just my thoughts, but that's okay, I'll try my fists and kicks." When he said this, his tone he became excited and violent again, clenched his fists, and walked slowly towards Mo Kyuyan. What a great opportunity, he actually wants to fight in close combat. But when Mo Kyuyan thought about it, he suddenly realized that Kano was no longer in front of him. He suddenly realized that he was in a battle, and because he suddenly encountered the opportunity he wanted, he was distracted for a moment, and this moment of distraction revealed a fatal flaw. This flaw is enough to be the key to victory or defeat in a master showdown. And Kano obviously caught this flaw. His voice floated from the back of MaleProtagonist's head, and cold sweat fell from MaleProtagonist's forehead. "Where are you looking?" It was too late to turn around, and it was too late to fight back. At the last moment, MaleProtagonist could only desperately dodge forward, while his thoughts kept gathering behind him. Boom! Like a flash flood or a volcano erupting, earth-shattering force came from MaleProtagonist's back and drove him into the mountain wall. One after another, there was a rumbling sound, like thunder. When MaleProtagonist came to his senses, severe pain had spread all over his body. He was punched by Kano into the mountain wall a full 5 meters away. If he hadn't used all his strength to wrap the front with his mind energy at the last moment, he would have been smashed to death. At this time, Kano's voice floated faintly into his ears. "This is just a greeting. If you lose your focus next time when I find you fighting with me, I will kill you directly." MaleProtagonist was horrified. Weird thing. He tried to get up and sweep away the gravel on his body, but a sharp pain made him shiver. "Damn it, my ribs are broken, I must not hit him again." Kano looked at MaleProtagonist, who climbed out of the mountain wall and showed a cruel smile. "Then let's get started." There was a thud under Kano's feet, and only a small crater was left in the splashing gravel. His men had already appeared in front of MaleProtagonist, and punched MaleProtagonist directly. MaleProtagonist was fully focused this time. Although Kano's movements were faster than he expected, he was still seen. Looking at the fist coming from the opponent, he also raised his fist wrapped in thought energy and hit the opponent with all his strength. The sound of fists clashing kept ringing in the cave, and MaleProtagonist was seen standing on the same spot. Kano's shadow kept flashing in front, back, left, and in all directions of him. The opponent's speed was too fast, and he could only stand where he was. He caught the opponent's punch, but fortunately, Kano didn't have as much experience as MaleProtagonist. With just a few punches back and forth, MaleProtagonist could still rely on his rich experience to resist. For a moment, both of them shot quickly, and they actually hit each other. On par. In just a few seconds, the two of them had exchanged dozens of punches. MaleProtagonist could still hold on at first, but his opponent's physical strength seemed to be endless. After a while, he began to struggle left and right, panting violently, and his strength lost. Gradually it dropped. But Kano didn't change at all. On the contrary, with each punch, his speed became faster and faster, and his skills became more and more skillful. And relying on his faster speed than MaleProtagonist, he completely suppressed the opponent. Just when MaleProtagonist was about to be unable to withstand the opponent's heavy punch, Kano snorted coldly, punched out, and took a few steps back with the help of the force. He looked at his hands, and there was a trace of white air coming out, and a smell of burnt smell came out. His fists were obviously burnt, and he had lost consciousness. Then he looked at MaleProtagonist's red hands, and he showed an interested expression. "Is this your ability? Can you make your hands emit high temperatures? It's probably almost 200 degrees, right?" Seeing Kano stop and his burned hands, MaleProtagonist finally breathed a sigh of relief. He didn't reply at all to the other party's question about his abilities. He was not going to introduce his abilities to anyone. The opponent's rookie. "While you are sick, I will kill you." With a sneer, MaleProtagonist rushed forward and punched Kano in the chest, but the opponent dodged it. But then the air around his fists became distorted, and wave after wave of high temperature came out of his fists. When Kano dodged the second punch, he missed it by a little. MaleProtagonist's hands rubbed him against him, causing a large burn on his chest. Then MaleProtagonist threw several more punches, but Kano dodged continuously, but I found that every time he missed a little bit, he was hit by the opponent's punch. After a few punches, All the hit areas on his body gave off a burning smell, as if it was roasted pork. With a slight sigh, Kano quickly retreated. After leaving MaleProtagonist for more than 10 meters, he jumped up suddenly and stepped on the top of the cave upside down. I saw his feet stepping into the rocks on the roof of the cave, his body hanging upside down and looking at MaleProtagonist. Did the high temperature affect the air, causing me to have visual errors? It seems that you are very confident in melee combat. Seeing that MaleProtagonist had no intention of answering, Kano curled his lips indifferently. If it's high temperature, I also need my body to be more heat resistant. The strength is not enough. I need to be stronger to break down your defense. MaleProtagonist raised his head and frowned at Kano, mumbling to himself above his head, but the scene that came down frightened him again. Kano's body actually grew in size at a speed that was visible to the naked eye. From the original height of 1.6 meters, he grew to 1.8 meters. The muscles on his body protruded one by one, bursting all the clothes on his upper body, exposing a large area. Muscles. His head also grew larger, and 2 small bumps grew on his forehead. But what was even more frightening was his hands. The hands that had been burned to the point of being almost cooked, pieces of rotten flesh fell off, and new granulations grew rapidly, filling the wounds in his hands. In the blink of an eye, Kano not only were the injuries on his hands healed, but they looked even stronger than before. A feeling of oppression that was several times stronger than before came from the top of MaleProtagonist's head. MaleProtagonist couldn't help but gritted his teeth and said, "What kind of monster are you?" "It's not a monster, it's the power of God." Kano laughed wildly. "With the power of God, I am invincible." The next moment, the wind roared, and Kano appeared in front of MaleProtagonist with a bang, and then punched out directly. The strong wind brought by the fist made MaleProtagonist almost unable to open his eyes. The strength is more than doubled than before. MaleProtagonist also punched out this time. All the energy in his body was concentrated on the fist, and his ability was exerted to the extreme. Visible distortions emerged from the fist. This was the refraction phenomenon caused by the high temperature affecting the air. Now the temperature of his hands has exceeded 300 degrees. Boom! The 2 pairs of fists collided together, colliding and squeezing each other with huge force. A second later, Kano remained motionless, but MaleProtagonist had already flown out. He spit out a mouthful of blood in mid-air and twisted his arm in a circle. Kano's punch just now had broken his hand bones. Broken bones. MaleProtagonist, who was lying on the ground, tried to straighten up and looked at Kano. What made him despair was that Kano's body was not damaged at all, and he couldn't even see any signs of exertion. His fist that should have been burned only had a little smoke. "Are you surprised? Why didn't I get burned this time?" Kano looked sarcastic. "How could I be fooled again by the same trick? When I repaired my hands just now, I had already put a layer of heat insulation on the skin of my hands. The cuticle, your ability can no longer do anything to me." If you zoom in on Kano's hands at this time, you can see that the outermost stratum corneum contains many gas micropores. Through the circulation of gas, heat is taken away, and even if the outermost stratum corneum is burned, it can grow again as long as it peels off a layer of skin. How is it possible? MaleProtagonist stared at Kano, as if he didn't believe what he said. "Nothing is impossible." Kano slowly walked in front of MaleProtagonist and looked at him proudly. "Police, I have already said that you don't know what you are fighting against. I am invincible with the power of God. I have no weaknesses. I will only get stronger and stronger." As he spoke, Kano grabbed MaleProtagonist's hand and let him activate his ability. "If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have tried this transformation so quickly. As a reward, you try your best and see if you can hurt me." MaleProtagonist roared, and waves of high temperature came from MaleProtagonist's hand and passed to Kano's hand. But it was useless. Even the high temperature of more than 300 degrees did not hurt Kano at all. The body standing in front of MaleProtagonist was no longer a human body. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, SpecialAbilities. Chapter 52. Looking at Kano's unscathed body, MaleProtagonist's eyes showed solemnity. Kano, now that things have come to this, I must kill you. Letting a monster like you live will be a huge threat to Emerald City. I will kill you here completely. Humph, what are you talking about? Kano looked at the other party with disdain and ridicule. MaleProtagonist stopped talking. Facing the overwhelming force, he calmly accepted the fact that the other party was powerful and made up his mind to destroy the other party, even at the cost of his own life. MaleProtagonist roared wildly and rushed towards Kano in front of him. With a puff, Kano reacted quickly. At the moment when MaleProtagonist rushed over, he punched out and pierced his chest. But MaleProtagonist did not react at all. He let Kano punch through his chest and just hugged Kano tightly. Are you here to die? Just as Kano was wondering, he found that MaleProtagonist's whole body turned red and emitted bursts of high temperature, as if it was cooked. So that's how it is. Not only your hands, but your whole body can emit high temperatures. But what's the problem? Kano smiled, and did not break free from MaleProtagonist's arms. He said calmly, I can change the structure of my whole body. Even if my whole body is attacked by high temperatures, I will be fine. You are just wasting your efforts by doing this. MaleProtagonist just hugged Kano tightly and said nothing. He knew that Kano was right. He saw that the epidermis of his body was constantly falling off and growing, and soon replaced with a layer of insulation. In this way, although MaleProtagonist's body temperature was high, it could not burn him. Maybe it would be okay for a longer time, but MaleProtagonist's ability was not without limit. Keeping the body in a high temperature state for a long time was also a huge burden for him. Thinking of this, MaleProtagonist did not hesitate. He saw a large amount of mind energy surging out of his body, and then the temperature of his body rose again. He actually used mind energy to enhance his ability. Visible to the naked eye, MaleProtagonist's whole body emitted bursts of white steam. That was the result of a sharp rise in body temperature, even exceeding the limit of his ability, resulting in large areas of burns in the body and a large amount of water evaporation. Are you crazy? Let go. Kano felt it at the first time. The heat insulation layer of the epidermis could no longer resist the high temperature, and the donated blood and body fluids were almost boiled in an instant. The high temperature spread throughout Kano's body in an instant, and the flesh reached the ignition point in the first time. The fat and muscle turned into fuel, turning Kano into a human torch. You lunatic! Looking at MaleProtagonist's withered face under the high temperature, Kano cursed. He hit MaleProtagonist, who was holding him frantically, but no matter how hard he dragged, the other party held him tightly. As his body continued to burn, Kano's strength gradually decreased. Leader! The three people outside the cave listened to Kano's screams and looked panicked. Just as they wanted to rush into the cave, a stream of thought came over and knocked them away again. And Suomi's mobile phone was also broken in this collision. Get out of here! Then a large ball of fire rushed over, flew past them, and fell directly into the woods in the distance, burning fiercely. After the fire, Kano, who was in a mess, also walked out of the cave. In the eyes of Suomi and the other two, Kano at this time could no longer be called a human. His whole body was covered with burns, and his skin was all charred, revealing pieces of muscle and bones. His face looked more like a skeleton than a person. The skeleton's mouth moved, as if he wanted to say something, but found that his tongue and vocal cords had been burned long ago, and he couldn't speak. Kano made an angry gesture, let out a silent roar, and rushed into the woods where the fire fell. MaleProtagonist in the woods was like a dried corpse, and his whole body was injured at this time. Not only was one of his hands broken by Kano, his chest was pierced, and when he was holding Kano, the other party hit, threw, and twisted him. At this moment, his body was broken and he couldn't even stand up. The high temperature of the body gradually decreased, but the surrounding woods were still burning. In the flames, Kano's zombie-like image suddenly appeared in front of him, looking at MaleProtagonist with an ugly smile. Looking at the other party slowly reaching out his hand, MaleProtagonist thought, failed, this monster, can't he be burned to death like this? Then his eyes went dark, and his head had been twisted off by Kano. Kano roared silently at the sky, and then smashed MaleProtagonist's head to pieces. Then he looked at MaleProtagonist's almost burnt body on the ground, stepped on it a few times, and tore the other's body into pieces. The three people outside the woods looked at Kano's crazy look, and with Kano's monster-like appearance at this time, they were silent. The three looked at each other and regretted Kano's acquisition of abilities for the first time. A few minutes later, when Kano walked out of the burning woods again, his zombie-like horror again scared Suomi and the other two, and they couldn't help but take a step back. "Boss, are you okay?" Suomi called out bravely, but no matter how he looked at it, Kano didn't look like he was okay. Kano waved his hand, indicating that he was fine. He walked up to the three people and looked at them strangely, wondering what they were planning. Suomi and the other two looked at each other, and finally Suomi bravely said, "Boss, what are you going to do now? You can't speak. Why don't you write it on the ground?" Kano reached out to stop Suomi from talking. He looked at the other three people. With half of his head turned into a skeleton, he stared at Carl and Bezos with a strange light in his eyes. Finally, he raised his finger towards Carl and motioned him to come over. Carl's heart skipped a beat. He felt that being stared at by Kano was like being stared at by a beast. He glanced at the other two. Although Carl felt very strange, his habit of working under Kano for many years still urged him to walk towards the other party. "Chief, what's the matter?" Carl looked at Carl's head that looked like a zombie skeleton and asked a little at a loss. Kano moved his mouth, but no sound came out, so he raised his hand and then waved it hard. Bang! Carl's head soared into the sky, and the headless body left behind was still standing on the ground. Blood spilled out like a fountain. Until his head fell to the ground, he still had a stunned expression on his face. Kano on the other side had already pounced on the corpse, biting and sucking fiercely at the wound on the neck of the corpse. "Chief, what are you doing?" "Carl." Somi and Bezos were shocked and angry, looking at Kano lying on Carl in disbelief. The other party did not intend to answer their questions at all. He just kept lowering his head to suck the blood from the corpse. Then Somi and Bezos saw a terrible scene. As Kano kept sucking blood, flesh grew back on his body, his injuries gradually recovered, and his skull head returned to its original appearance. In less than a minute, when Kano wiped the blood from his mouth and stood up, he looked intact. No. It was stronger than before. His body was rebuilt again, becoming more suitable for fighting. The two small bags on his head were gone, and two small horns grew out instead. The muscles of his arms and torso became stronger, and his face became younger and more weird. At this time, Kano was no longer the same as before. Feeling the more surging power in his body after sucking blood, he laughed out loud. When he was half burned to death just now, he was worried that he was really finished. Who knew that even if most of his body was burned, his strength was not much weakened, and his movements were not affected. And when he crushed MaleProtagonist to ashes in a rage, he was attacked by waves of hunger. When he saw Suomi and the other two, this feeling became particularly strong. Until the end, when he couldn't bear it anymore, he killed Carl and drank his blood. Then his body recovered at an unimaginable speed, and he even felt that his body was stronger than before. Since he got the ability, the tyranny that he had always had has also weakened a lot, and he became rational again. Kano looked at the forest that was burning more and more fiercely. He suddenly took a deep breath, and then waved his palm towards the forest with all his strength. Boom! Like a typhoon passing through, the airflow generated by just waving his arm actually blew down a large area of forest directly. What's more terrible is that under the terrible wind force, the flames that were just burning were blown out in one breath. Clenching his fist, Kano looked at Suomi and the other two who were like frightened birds, and smiled evilly. "Don't worry, it was an emergency just now, I won't eat you. Let's go." He waved his hand and walked towards the woods. Suomi and the other two looked at each other behind him, and felt a chill coming out from behind. They could only bite the bullet and follow. On the other side, the fire caught Li Anping's attention. After knocking Ye Wenbin unconscious, he rushed into the woods and encountered fog after a few hundred meters. But he didn't even hesitate, and plunged into the fog. With his amazing memory and sense of direction, he kept rushing towards the direction of the fire in his memory. No matter what the terrain is, it can't stop him at all, climbing mountains and jumping off cliffs. As long as the direction is confirmed in advance, the fog can't stop Li Anping at all. At this time, whether it is strength, speed, perception, smell, touch, or sense of direction, reaction, and memory, he is already a monster far beyond ordinary people. Taking a deep breath and smelling the burnt smell in the air, he knew that he was approaching the target. However, he didn't know that because he walked almost in a straight line and completely ignored the terrain. Although he walked very fast, he missed Kano and his group who followed the mark and took a detour. So Kano and Li Anping did not meet. When Li Anping came to the entrance of the cave, he could only see the destroyed forest. "Is it Kano? Looking at the destruction of this forest, did someone fight here just now?" Li Anping squatted down and observed the destroyed trees on the ground. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Seong Lango. Chapter 53. In addition to the blown trees, Li Anping also saw some trees burned by the flames. Is it a flamethrower? Or someone with the ability to breathe fire? Li Anping couldn't be sure, so he walked forward and soon saw Carl lying at the entrance of the cave. The head was twisted off. Li Anping looked at Carl's headless body, and suddenly there was a familiar feeling in his eyes. Such a brutal method of killing was what he often used. But the next moment Li Anping frowned, and he saw traces of bites on Carl's neck. It reminded him of some bad memories. "Hey, what do you think?" Seeing this kind of scar, Li Anping couldn't help but ask about Hey. "You are not the only one in the world who can eat people. Some people kill too many people and have psychological problems. This is normal." Hey paused, and then his tone changed. "But this place does give me a familiar feeling. Go into that cave and have a look." Li Anping nodded. The cave looked so suspicious. Even without Hei's reminder, he planned to go in and have a look. But what he didn't know was that Hei's idea of here was more than just familiarity. So Li Anping entered the cave cautiously, completely letting go of his hearing, touch, and smell to guard against any possible attack. If it was really Kano's place, did someone attack him? Who could it be? Li Anping searched the cave carefully while thinking calmly. Suddenly his eyes lit up and the cave became wider. A hall appeared in front of him, which made his anger rise again and his eyes were splitting. This is... He saw the stone statue of the black god and hundreds of girls' heads surrounding the stone statue. There was a stone platform in the center of the hall with fresh blood stains on it, as if someone had just been tortured on it. Near the side of the cave entrance, he also found Lal's body. On the other side of the hall is a cell, all covered with bloody iron pillars and chains. Although he was filled with anger, Li Anping carefully checked all places. By now, he was basically certain that this was where Kano came here every month. It seemed that the girls he took out every time were eventually brought here for blood sacrifices. And just now, it seemed that there had been an attack here, and 2 people died. Kano disappeared. Li Anping stood in front of the stone statue, looking at the hundreds of girls' heads that were still full of fear, resentment, and despair, as if they were alive, and the fire in his heart became hotter and hotter. He took a deep breath and slowly raised his fist. At this moment, He suddenly said, "Wait. What's wrong? I'm going to destroy this place." "No. It's nothing." For some reason, He didn't speak anymore. Although it felt like He had something he didn't say, Li Anping didn't care about him. He just wanted to vent properly now. The fist hit the stone statue hard, but the flesh and blood body was like a raging wind, and the stone statue was shattered with just one punch. Li Anping swept from the cave like a huge wind, and behind him, with the sound of collapse, the entire cave had turned into ruins. Everything inside was also buried. "Kano, I will cut you into pieces." Brutal power filled Li Anping's body and mind. Even if the entire cave was destroyed, not a single bit was eliminated. On the contrary, it expanded and brewed even more. Why is there so much evil in the world? Why is the world so dirty? Just because there are people like Kano and people like Shang Zhenbang. They have no right to live. I want to kill all the evil in the world. I'm going to kill him. Astonishing murderous aura emerged from Li Anping's body, his eyes became like red gems, and his thoughts emerged from his body, weak but firm. Nian Qi is originally the unity of body and soul. When the spirit or body changes, Nian Qi will also change. Therefore, the thought energy of each ability user is unique. But now, under the stimulation of Li Anping's spirit, his thoughts have also undergone subtle changes. Where is he? He reminded, you can smell it with your nose. Not only your hearing, your five senses should be far superior to ordinary people. Nose, Li Anping took a deep breath and smelled many smells, including those of humans, animals, and vegetation. But there was one smell that was the strongest among them, that evil smell, like a big meal, giving Li Anping a fatal temptation. Is this the smell of Kano? It's such a familiar taste, he replied. Eat it. Eat it. Eat it. You must eat it. At this moment, although he couldn't remember where he had smelled a similar smell, his accumulated intuition and experience over thousands of years told him that as long as he ate Kano, he and Li Anping would become stronger and more terrifying. Li Anping also felt that the power in his body was about to move, and he seemed to be impatient to find Kano. Then let's go. Go kill him. Li Anping's figure disappeared in an instant. A second later, the ground where he originally stepped cracked, as if he had been stepped on by a giant. The entire ground sank, leaving a big pit. What he didn't notice was that in the collapsed cave, the head of the stone statue suddenly turned. Its eyes seemed to be able to see through everything. It looked through the rocks in the direction where Li Anping left, with a trace of doubt in its eyes. Fear. After a moment the entire avatar became silent again, as if nothing had happened. Kano and his party were all ability users and had made marks. Although they didn't have Li Anping's ability to walk in a straight line based on intuition, they were still very fast. When Li Anping arrived at the cave, they had also reached the foot of the mountain. Looking at the unconscious Ye Wenbin in the sports car, Kano rubbed his chin and didn't know what to think. Originally, I gathered everyone in the building and contracted my power. I waited until I gained the ability to decide the next move. But now that Ye Wenbin appears here, it means that the situation in the city has changed. After speaking, Kano looked towards Somi. No, Chief, my phone seemed to have been damaged just now, and I haven't been able to contact our people. I don't know what's going on. Then ask him, Kano said, tilting his neck. Then the three got into the sports car, with Bezos driving and Kano sitting in the passenger seat. Suomi was sitting in the back row and asked Ye Wenbin what he said. The moment Ye Wenbin woke up, he was startled. He thought Li Anping had been killed. When he saw Suomi in front of him, he immediately realized that this was a life or death moment. What's going on? Why are you here, Suomi asked. Ye Wenbin knew that his injuries could not be hidden from others, and they would know about the building sooner or later. There was only one thing he could hide now. As long as Suomi doesn't know that he told Li Anping so many things, he should be fine. The headquarters was attacked, and all the brothers were killed. It was a man who did it. He brought me to Black Dragon Mountain to find you. His words shocked Suomi and Bezos, but Kano looked calm, as if he was not the leader of the lone wolf. No wonder Mo Kyuyan came back to find us. He must have come to silence us. Chief, let's run away quickly. Entering the Emerald City now is a trap. Kano didn't react at all. He just turned his head and asked Ye Wenbin, do you know who the man who attacked is? Ye Wenbin looked at the strange man in front of him in surprise, as if he couldn't believe that he was Kano, but Suomi just called him the leader. There was no time for him to think, so he replied subconsciously, I don't know who he is, but he just went up the mountain to find you. Suddenly, Ye Wenbin was stunned, his eyes were blank, and he gradually lost his energy. Kano stretched out his fingers from Ye Wenbin's head, put it to his mouth and licked it. Mo Kyuyan? It's a pity that he is already dead. Kano smacked his lips and said, it seems to have no effect. It seems that only the blood of ability users is useful. It can make me stronger. He thought he was attacking the headquarters. It was Mo Kyuyan who had just gone up the mountain. He tried the effect of Ye Wenbin, an ordinary person, but in the end he didn't eat anything. After hearing the second half of Kano's sentence, Suomi felt a chill. Kano didn't take it seriously. He continued, go directly to Emerald City. Well, just go to Zhongai Hall to find Lu Jun. There should be quite a lot of capable people there. Hearing this, Suomi persuaded bravely, but Zhongai Hall has many masters and its influence is deeply rooted in the local area. Moreover, people from the special service team are also looking for us now. Mo Kyuyan even took the initiative to come to us. Chief, we should take a long-term approach. You don't understand. Kano shook his head. Somi, I am strong. I am very strong now. Strong enough to rule the entire Emerald City secretly. And as time goes by, I will become stronger and stronger. Before long, I will surpass Yalikan, surpass Daxia Lonke, and surpass Ice Castle's Flame Dragon Pioneer, even surpassing the madman like Demir Donner. I will have the power to destroy the planet. So we went to find Lu Jun. It doesn't matter if it's Violet, the Kirin Regiment, or the Special Forces. They will just become my food. Suomi listened blankly to Kano's words and didn't know what to say. Seeing his appearance, Kano shrugged and said, you're too slow. He looked at the sports car driving more than 100 yards on the highway and said, it's too slow. I can't wait any longer. It's still me. Go ahead and come here yourself. His eyes flashed with bloodlust. Haha, I will give you the signal. After saying that, he opened the car door and leaned his upper body out. You're sick. Do you want to be killed? The driver behind him immediately honked his horn and cursed. Kano looked at the driver of a car behind the sports car, smiled, and then jumped out. Boom. He kicked on the hood of the car behind him and watched the car slowly deform under his impact. The driver had a horrified expression on his face. Kano laughed wildly and exerted force on his feet. He flew forward. And the car he stepped on was instantly squeezed into a ball by the impact, and collided with the car coming from behind, causing a series of car accidents. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Seong Lang-go. Chapter 54. Before he finished speaking, a series of air explosions were heard, and Fang Chi had come to the front of the dwarf who had just shouted in a few steps. Not good. Lu Jun punched out, but Fang Chi shattered his liquefied fist, and he knew it was not good. The opponent's strength was much stronger than he imagined. It seemed that he did not use all his strength when fighting with the 4 heavenly kings under his command last time. But now was not the time to think about these things. The liquid that was scattered on the ground condensed towards Lu Jun's body again, and his other hand had turned into a long whip, rolling towards Fang Qi at a distance of more than 10 meters. He knew that his strength was not as good as Fang Qi, and this time he just wanted to interfere with the opponent. At this time, Fang Qi had already punched out, and the huge, black, and scaly fist, attached with a large amount of mental energy, blasted towards Wang Song's chest like a meteorite, almost covering his entire field of vision. If you block it, you will die. At this moment, facing Fang Qi's attack, Wang Song, one of the 4 heavenly kings, had such a thought in his mind, relying on the experience gained from countless battles and assassinations. While he was shocked, he also stimulated all his potential. He tilted his head back, held his chest inward, shrank his body backward, and kicked his legs hard. Wang Song used all his strength to dodge the punch. At the same time, all 10 fingers of his hands pointed at Fang Qi. His ability can eject the blood in his body like bullets, and the power is comparable to that of a shotgun. However, facing Wang Song's counterattack, Fang Qi just closed his eyes and let the blood shoot on his eyelids and cheeks, making a series of metal collision sounds, and still maintained his original appearance and punched out. However, being blocked by this, Wang Song was forced to retreat a few centimeters more and dodge the first punch. Fang Qi snorted coldly, opened his eyelids, looked at Wang Song's position, took another step, and punched out again. This time, there was a blue electric spark on his fist. He used the innate ability of Kylin blood, and the electricity would paralyze the opponent at a distance of several centimeters, giving Wang Song no chance to dodge. But a hint of joy flashed in Wang Song's eyes. Because when Fang Qi threw the second punch, the other few people had already arrived. If it was one person, if I faced Fang Qi alone, he would kill me with just 2 punches. Wang Song's eyes flashed with a trace of fear and relief for surviving the disaster. Among the few people, Lu Jun was the first to arrive. A transparent water whip wrapped around Fang Qi's neck and was about to pull him back. At the same time, the other 3 of the 4 heavenly kings, Lu Xian, Fang Yang, and Zhengji, also took action. Lu Xian opened his palm slightly towards Fang Qi's position, and an inexplicable airflow was generated around Fang Qi's chest. This is his ability, the air bomb, which generates shock waves by compressing the air. It can shock people to death like a bomb. Fang Yang came closer and grabbed Fang Qi's shoulders with his green hands. There are more than 200 deadly toxins in his body. Anyone who is directly exposed to him will never feel good. Zhengji opened his mouth slightly, and a line of fire shot out of his mouth, like a red laser, burning towards Fang Qi's legs. The other 2 modified people were like ice sculptures before they started, but once they started, they were the most violent too. I saw their eyes flash red, and they rushed towards Fang Qi from the left and right. I don't know how thick their exoskeleton armor is. Every step they take will make a loud noise from their feet. When the 2 people run at the same time, the whole building seems to be shaking. Just hitting Fang Qi with bare hands, the power of the machine is exquisitely displayed. From the perspective of strength, it is not weaker than Fang Qi's punch just now, and even more so. 6 masters, 6 attacks at Fang Qi at the same time. Wang Song seems to have seen the dawn of victory. If he doesn't want to be killed in one blow, he can only dodge, but once he starts dodging, he will be surrounded and lose. But just as Wang Song was thinking this, he saw Fang Qi didn't dodge or evade, and the second punch didn't even pause, and continued to hit his chest like an overwhelming force. At the same time, blue electric sparks covered Fang Qi's entire body. The black scales were more hideous against the background of the mind and electric sparks. The water whip was the first one who couldn't stand it, and it shrank back into Lu Jun's body as soon as it was electrocuted. Fang Yang's poisonous hand couldn't withstand this kind of electric shock either, and it retreated before it touched the body. But Lu Xian didn't care. The air bomb exploded directly on Fang Chi's chest, forcing him to close his eyes again. But he just closed his eyes. The turbulent airflow was like a breeze in front of Fang Chi, and the vibration caused by the shock wave of the air bomb could not penetrate his scales at all. The fire line in Zheng Ji's mouth swept across Fang Chi's legs, leaving nothing but a burn mark. The defensive power of the Kylan blood scale armor far exceeded their expectations. Then the fists of the two modified people hit his waist at the same time. Bang! Fang Chi's body shook, and the place where he was hit by the fist actually sank. If there were no scales, you can see Fang Chi's face pale at this time. Obviously the fists of the two people injured his internal organs. But even so, Fang Chi's punch still did not change its trajectory, and hit Wang Song, as if there was nothing in the world that could stop him from hitting this punch. Ah! Wang Song screamed, and the person had already flown out like a puddle of mud, fell to the ground, and fainted. Fang Chi blew Wang Song away with a punch, and then he ran forward with a breath of white air. The other 6 people behind him followed him with red eyes. 7-1, and one of them was killed right away. It was a great shame. However, until Fang Chi took a deep breath and turned around to face them again, no one could grasp his speed. At this time, the different reactions and speeds of the 6 people present were also seen. The fastest were the 2 modified people. They followed Fang Chi closely. When he turned around, they punched Fang Chi in the face and chest again. Next was Lu Jun. He seemed to have known that his ability was restrained by electric shock and could not attack Fang Chi at close range. So he shot out dozens of liquefied tentacles from his body, took out the pistols in the arms of his brothers, and pointed them all at Fang Chi. Next was Lu Xian. When Fang Chi was moving, it was difficult for him to create air bombs to attack the opponent, because his ability needs to be charged. So as soon as Fang Chi stopped, he started to create air explosions on both sides of Fang Chi's ears. He wanted to attack the opponent's brain by vibrating Fang Chi's eardrum. Then it was Zheng Ji. At this time, 3 fireballs spewed out of his mouth, all flying towards Fang Chi's face. Obviously, he knew that the flames from his mouth were not enough to break Fang Chi's scales, so he could only attack the eyes, ears, mouth, and nose on his face. The slowest one was Fang Yong. As a poisoner, he was the one who was most afraid of being electrocuted by Fang Chi. Because Lu Jun could liquefy and get out at any time, and the 2 modified people had exoskeleton armor, and their ability to resist attacks was obviously better than his. The other 2 attacked from a distance, and only he was close. If his small body was paralyzed by the electric shock and then hit by Fang Chi, I am afraid that the result would not be much better than Wang Song's. However, the battle would not stop because of his daze. In his eyes, Fang Chi took a deep breath, and his whole body seemed to be a little bigger. Facing the fist of the cyborg, he did not dodge, but punched out with both fists at the same time, one on the left and one on the right, and hit the metal fist of the cyborg. 3 people, 4 fists collided with each other, and a rumbling sound came out. The people present seemed to feel that the whole room was shaken. The marble floor under the feet of the 3 people made a tooth-grinding sound of breaking, and turned into pieces. The 2 cyborgs groaned and had to retreat, with horror in their hearts. Since they completed the transformation operation, it was the first time they met someone who could overwhelm them in strength, and 2 people at the same time. As the 2 retreated, a series of sparks flashed on Fang Chi's body, and Lu Jun controlled more than 10 pistols to shoot at Fang Chi at the same time. The huge kinetic energy generated by the impact of the bullets hit Fang Chi backwards, and he had to hold his head with both hands to protect his face. Then, one on the left and one on the right, Lu Xian's 2 air bombs mixed with the fireballs spit out by Zheng Ji exploded together, and the huge vibration made Fang Chi's brain buzz. The flames also swept his whole body in an instant. When the battle started, Fang Chi had to stop for the first time. Lu Jun's face was happy, and he shouted, "Why don't you hurry up?" The two modified people looked at each other, nodded, and pulled out a dagger from their waists at the same time. Dangerous blue light lit up from the blade of the dagger. The two modified people had already attacked Fang Chi again. After the explosion, Fang Chi put down his arms and looked at the daggers in the hands of the two people, and his pupils shrank slightly. Is it a high-frequency dagger? The same as what I saw on the battlefield last time. Fang Chi knew the horror of this high-frequency weapon. This kind of dagger that vibrates tens of thousands of times per second, there is nothing that can't be cut, and it is impossible to resist it with flesh and blood. Even Fang Chi's mind and the scales produced by Kylin blood are the same. He could only suppress the dizziness in his mind and dodge behind him. The two cyborgs followed Fang Chi when they saw him retreat, and they were absolutely unwilling to give Fang Chi any chance to catch his breath. Lu Jun and his men on the other side also kept compressing Fang Chi's dodging space through gunfire and predicted air explosions mixed with flames, forcing him to defend against the high-frequency daggers of the two cyborgs head-on. Fang Yong stood in front of Lu Xian to protect him from using his abilities safely. Just when everyone thought Fang Chi had fallen into a disadvantage and the outcome was about to be decided, he shouted loudly, and his fists burst out dazzling lightning, and he punched a cyborg through the air. The two balls of lightning on his hands rushed out like two thunder dragons, pounced on a cyborg and kept biting him, knocking him out directly and falling to the ground. The cyborg was covered with electric sparks, and he tried to stand up several times but couldn't get up, and he couldn't move for a while. Obviously, the Thunder Dragon just now had penetrated his exoskeleton armor and damaged his internal circuits. Fang Chi also took this opportunity to break out of the encirclement of the two cyborgs. Before anyone could react, he flashed and appeared in front of Fang Yong, knocking him out with one palm. Then he quickly punched and knocked out the bewildered Lu Xian. When Lu Jun, Zhengji, and another cyborg reacted, only 3 of them were left out of the original 7. Ha, ha, ha. Fang Chi looked at the remaining 3 people, panting heavily, and his arms trembled one after another. The skill of shooting thunder dragons with both hands just now was also very burdensome for him. Even in the Bai royal family, not many people can do it. Fang Chi exhaled and said, "Do you want to continue?" The remaining cyborg looked at Jennifer, not knowing how to answer. Lu Jun's face was livid, staring at Fang Chi, as if he just met him now. Zhengji's flame jet and Lu Jun's attack could hardly threaten Fang Chi, and there was only one person left on the cyborg side, and close combat might not be able to stop the opponent. The situation is already very clear. Okay, Lu Jun nodded and said, "Fang boy, you are really hard to hide your strength. You are already at the 3rd energy level, almost the 4th energy level." Fang Chi smiled proudly, "Yes, my Kylin blood has reached the level of a 3rd level ability user, plus the original ability sequence is high, and at the same 3rd energy level, few ability users can defeat me. So Boss Lu, surrender. Being my subordinate is far more promising than being in Zhongai Hall, and I will also help you with your son's revenge. How about it?" Lu Jun was silent, his eyebrows were deeply frowned, and the contradiction in his heart seemed to have reached its limit. In the hall, except for the people from the Kylin group, the other 2 parties were silent. No one expected this result. At this moment, facing Fang Chi's powerful strength, they only felt helpless and waited quietly for Lu Jun's choice. Just as Jennifer said before, in the dark world, strength is the ultimate reliance. But in the silence of everyone, a strange chewing sound suddenly sounded. I don't know when, in front of Wang Song's body lying on the ground, a strange man suddenly appeared. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xiong Go. Chapter 55. A strange man with 2 horns on his head squatted in front of Wang Song, grabbed his ear and tore it off, then put it into his mouth. While chewing, he murmured, "It's really unpalatable to eat it raw, but the ability is good." "What are you doing, Lu Jun looked at the strange man with his eyes wide open, and waved his hand. The dozen pistols on the tentacles were all aimed at the strange man. He roared, "Let him go." The strange man smiled at him, raised his hands above his head, and slowly backed away. "Go to hell." More than a dozen pistols sprayed flames at the same time, beating the strange man into a sieve and falling into a pool of blood. Then Lu Jun and Zhengzhi rushed up together, looking at Wang Song and shouting, "Old Wang, how are you?" Zhengzhi turned Wang Song over, but the scene in front of him made him pale. "This bastard," Lu Jun gritted his teeth and cursed. Wang Song's stomach had been completely cut open, and the internal organs inside had disappeared. "Boss, be careful. He's standing up again," the younger brothers outside the field shouted. He, the strange laughter sounded behind the two of them, and they felt a chill in their hearts. They turned their heads at the same time and found that the weirdo had stood up from the pool of blood since they didn't know when. The bullet had drilled out of his body, and the wounds on his body were slowly healing. Super fast regeneration. Lu Jun glared at him fiercely, then looked at Fang Qi on the side and said, "Fang kid, who is he? Why did he kill Wang Song?" And eat him. He suspected that this was Fang Qi's backup and invited help. Unexpectedly, Fang Qi shook his head and said, "I don't know him either, but he dared to do this kind of thing under our noses. Naturally, I will give you an explanation, Boss Lu." He turned his head and looked at the weirdo and asked, "Who are you? Who sent you here? If you think you can do whatever you want with a little regeneration ability, then you are wrong. I will make you regret having this ability." As he said, he walked towards the weirdo and grabbed the weirdo's neck. Fang Qi thought about the possible counterattacks from the opponent in advance, but he believed that with his own strength and fighting skills, the opponent's resistance would be in vain, but nothing happened, and the opponent was caught without any resistance. The thick and black claws, which looked like an ancient wild beast, grabbed the weirdo's neck as if pinching a little chicken. The people around were afraid that Fang Qi would accidentally break his neck. He, this dwarf's ability is very useful." The weirdo just laughed and looked at Fang Qi with a weird look, which Fang Qi had only seen on the battlefield and those extremely hungry refugees. It seemed that he would never be full and would eat anything he saw. Suppressing the weird feeling in his heart, Fang Qi pinched the weirdo's neck hard and asked coldly, "I ask who you are. Who sent you? I know you have the ability to regenerate. If you don't answer me, I will break your neck." The weirdo just sneered at Fang Qi, and then a stream of strange sounds came out of his body. Creak. Squeak. Something seemed to be squeezing and flowing in his body. This is. Just when Fang Qi felt strange, the weirdo's eyes kept bulging, and most of his eyeballs seemed to be out of his eye sockets, staring at Fang Qi. Bang! A series of sounds like firecrackers exploding rang out, and countless blood beads burst out from the weirdo's body, from his arms, thighs, stomach, chest, neck, and face. One wound after another was torn by the ejected blood beads, and even his eyeballs were broken, and two blood thorns poked out directly from inside and pierced Fang Qi's eyes. "Ah!" Fang Qi screamed and punched the weirdo out. In the entire reception room, screams came one after another, and almost everyone was hit by blood bullets and fell to the ground. There were only a few people who were still alive. Among them, Lu Jun's body was liquefied and unharmed. Zhengzhi covered his chest. Although he tried his best to dodge, he was also hit by several bullets. Before the ability user reaches the third energy level, it is impossible to use the mind to resist this kind of attack with power comparable to that of a small caliber pistol. Fang Yong and Lu Xian, who fell to the ground, were not injured because they were not standing. As for the two cyborgs, this kind of blood bullet could not penetrate their exoskeleton armor at all. Lei Jiao of the Kylan group and Jennifer of Violet were also fine. The former moved slightly and dodged all the blood bullets. The latter hid behind the cyborg one step ahead. It turned out that although Jennifer was not a cyborg, One of her eyes was implanted with a mechanical eye, which saw through the unusual changes in the body of the monster in advance. After this wave of attacks, Fang Qi was the most seriously injured. He covered his eyes, blood kept flowing out, veins on his forehead bulged, and strong anger filled his heart. Lei Jiao hurried to his side and helped him up. "Captain, are you okay? I want to kill him. I want to kill him," Fang Qi roared, like an angry lion. He, you can't kill me." Unknown to some extent, the weirdo walked towards the direction of Fang Yong and Lu Xian again. The wounds on his body that were torn by the blood bullet had healed, and his eyes had also returned to their original state. It was impossible to tell that he had used such a terrifying and strange ability before. Lu Jun looked at Fang Qi, and a hint of joy flashed through his heart. He had been forced into a corner by Fang Qi, but unexpectedly, a strange man came and blinded Fang Qi's eyes. Although he also lost a group of his subordinates, as for subordinates, he had as many as he wanted. Compared with Fang Qi being blinded, it was a huge profit. Lu Jun looked at the strange man reaching out to grab Fang Yong and Lu Xian, and hurriedly liquefied his body, turning into a 3-meter-tall water giant and rushed over. Although the opponent's ability was weird, he was not afraid of this kind of physical attack at all with his ability to liquefy his body. Although the strange man blinded Fang Qi's eyes, seeing his actions after eating Wang Song before, he had to go over quickly to protect the unconscious Zheng Ji and Fang Yong. But he stopped after just a few steps. Although the current situation is good, it is not a sure win. Fang Qi was only blinded, and the transformation state of Kailan blood has not been lifted. Moreover, the opponent is proficient in the martial arts of Bio country. It is hard to say whether the loss of vision has greatly reduced his combat power. Lei Jiao is obviously also a capable person. His combat power is still unknown, but he is unscathed. On the other hand, he is the only one who is intact on the Zhongai Hall side. On the Violet side, only Jennifer and a cyborg are still capable. But if you think about it carefully, if the monster is still alive, the cyborg will protect Jennifer, and Lei Jiao will protect Fang Qi. Only he, as the head of Zhongai Hall, is completely unaffected by the monster's attack. Lei Jiao supported Fang Qi, and when he saw Lu Jun stop, he couldn't help but yelled, "Boss Lu, what are you doing? Catch him quickly." Jennifer on the side also shouted, "The heat in this man's body is getting higher and higher. I don't know what kind of attack he is brewing. Catch him quickly." Lu Jun smiled and slowly walked in front of the weirdo. He didn't punch him as expected, but stretched out more than a dozen tentacles from his body to grab the other party. "If I punch him, I might knock him away or kill him, but if I catch him, will he attack indiscriminately like before? If so, I might be able to take advantage of this meeting." While Lu Jun was still thinking about the struggle between the three major forces, he didn't know that he had made a mistake that he would regret for the rest of his life. If he used all his strength to turn his body into a hammer or fist to blast the weirdo away, or turned it into a sharp blade to cut the weirdo's hand, or directly rescued Zheng Ji first and swept them away with a water whip, then the next things might be different. But Lu Jun chose to control and catch the other party with water tentacles because of some unknown thinking, his contempt for the monster, his lack of understanding, and the fact that the monster had always pretended to be weak. So in the few seconds when he was slow, the monster had already grabbed Fang Yong's shoulder, and Lu Jun's liquefied tentacles caught the monster. But he pulled hard and found that he couldn't hold the monster. What a great strength! Just as Lu Jun was surprised by the monster's strength, the monster suddenly bit Fang Yong in his hand and actually bit off a piece of meat from his neck. Poor Fang Yong, who was in a coma, opened his eyes and moved his mouth, but he didn't even scream, and he died. Lu Jun roared, stretched out more than a dozen tentacles, and finally caught the monster. But he saw that the other party didn't resist at all, but just kept chewing the meat in his mouth. Not only Lu Jun, but also Lei Jiao and Jennifer felt a sense of fear. You lunatic, Lu Jun began to regret that he was a step late and another brother died. He no longer cared about the three major forces or Fang Chi's life or death. He directly dragged the weirdo into his 3-meter-tall liquefied body. Just drown in my body. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xiong Go. Chapter 56. Struggle, begging for mercy is useless, I want you to regret everything you have done in the hell of water. After Lu Jun said this, he did not see any anxiety or regret from the other party as he imagined. The weirdo was caught in the huge water man transformed by Lu Jun, but he did not see any panic. Instead, he showed a hint of satisfaction after eating the meat in his mouth. Then he opened his mouth and began to vomit. Yes, he began to vomit in the water man's body, and large clumps of black liquid like ink were spit out from his mouth. The black liquid permeated the water man's body and covered most of the water man's body in a blink of an eye. What is it? Lu Jun felt something was wrong, and he turned around and threw the weirdo out of his body. But the black liquid did not decrease at all, but became more and more, gradually covering the whole body of the water man and turning black. The weirdo was thrown to the ground by Lu Jun, and he stood up with a cough and wiped the black liquid still remaining at the corner of his mouth. What did you do in my body? The weirdo ignored him, laughed, and walked towards Lu Xian. Lu Jun shouted angrily, and turned one hand into a giant hammer and smashed it in front of the weirdo, smashing the marble floor into pieces. Answer me, what did you do? The weirdo looked back at him, then clenched his fist and punched the water hammer in front of him. In Lu Jun's unbelieving eyes, the huge force smashed the water hammer into pieces with one punch, turning it into countless water droplets, and gathered towards Lu Jun again. Violet, Zhongai Hall, Kylan Group, let me introduce myself, my name is Kano. The weirdo glanced at the people in the living room, grabbed Lu Xian, and no one stopped him. The weirdo's ability is weirder than everyone imagined. They planned not to rush to do it before they figured it out. Kano didn't seem to be provoking them. This time he just slit a wound on Lu Xian's arm with his nails, and then licked Lu Xian's blood. You should have heard of me. I am the leader of the lone wolf, Kano said after licking the blood. Impossible, Kano should not have the ability, and it's not like you, Lu Jun retorted. Jennifer on the side also said, Sir, no matter who you are now the enemy of the three strongest forces in Emerald City. Do you understand your situation? It's you who don't understand the situation. Mortals. Kano threw the unconscious Lu Xian to the ground, looked at the people present, and said provocatively, my ability is evolution, which can adjust the structure of the flesh. By sucking the flesh and blood of the ability users, I can even have their abilities. If you all stopped me just now, there would be a chance. But now, just when everyone looked at Kano with disbelief and questioning eyes, he bent his palm slightly and pointed it at Zhengji. Zhengji looked at Kano with panic. What are you going to do? He was shot through the chest by a blood bullet just now, and he was already seriously injured. At this moment, being stared at by Kano, a strong sense of uneasiness emerged in his heart. Kano smiled slightly and squeezed his palm hard. Boom! The air gathered together under the inexplicable pressure, and then exploded. The huge wind generated by the air pressure swept the entire conference room, shattering a large row of glass windows. Zhengji, who was at the explosion site, had already fallen down covered in blood. It's a pity, the time is a little short. If it's just blood sucking, it will probably take longer to master this ability and increase the power. Kano looked at his palm and shook his head. His series of actions scared the people around him. They saw clearly that Kano used the air bomb that originally belonged to Lu Xian. How is it possible? Whether it was Jennifer, Lu Jun, or Lei Xiao, they couldn't believe their eyes at this moment. There is actually the ability to learn other people's abilities. Thinking of the previous blood bomb, isn't it Wang Song's ability? Thinking of this, they looked at Kano with fear in their eyes. Just sucking a mouthful of blood can have other people's abilities, this ability is simply too heaven-defying. Think about Kano having dozens or hundreds of abilities. Everyone couldn't help but stand up. If that's the case, I'm afraid no one in the world can be his opponent anymore. A bad idea also emerged in Lu Jun's mind, pointing at Kano and trembling, you. Oh. You just reacted now. Kano walked in front of Zhengji, stirred his fingers on the other's body, and then put it in his mouth. Yes, I injected the toxin into your body. Although your liquefied body is ineffective against physical attacks and the toxin injection has no reaction, you have to change back to your original body. If you change back with these toxins, what will happen to your body? Unless you can stay in your life, you're dead. After Kano finished speaking, he spit out the blood and flesh in his mouth with a puff. It's really disgusting. In short, your life is already counted down. After you die, I will take the ability from you. Hee, I quite like the ability of liquefaction. But, damn it, Lu Jun looked at his dark body and couldn't speak. Kano was right. After he turned back to his original body, these toxins would also remain in his body, and the time he liquefied was not infinite. Seeing Lu Jun at a loss, Kano turned his gaze directly to Fang Qi. His Kailan blood was the ability he wanted most among all the people present. However, Fang Qi was very threatening before, so he could only deliberately show weakness and secretly plot against the other party's eyes. But even so, he felt that the overall situation was settled after absorbing the abilities of 4 people. As for Violet, cyborgs were not on his menu. And Jennifer was just an ordinary person, which was in line with Violet's style of managing managers and competence differently. But when he looked at Fang Qi's position, only Fang Qi was left, and Lei Jiao had disappeared. Escaped. Just as this thought flashed through Kano's mind, a cold touch passed through his body, and his sight kept falling in a 360-degree rotation. At the end of his sight, he could only see his headless body falling to the ground in pieces, and Lei Jiao was standing behind him and slowly taking a machete into his arms. Super speed ability. With this doubt, Kano's world fell into darkness. Lei Jiao's ability is super speed. He can move and attack at a speed that is out of the human retina. While Kano was talking, he had already clearly understood that he must destroy the monster in front of him immediately. Go back to hell and enjoy it. Lei Jiao stepped on Kano's head with his mind, crushing his head. How is it, Lei Jiao, did you kill him? Fang Qi asked. He was stabbed in the eye and couldn't see the situation in front of him clearly. It's too dead to die. Seeing Kano being killed, everyone present was relieved, but Lu Jun screamed in pain. One of his arms turned back to its original appearance, but was instantly penetrated by black venom and turned into a pool of rotten meat. And the rest of his body kept switching between liquefaction and flesh and blood. Obviously, the time limit for liquefaction has expired. Originally, he could hold on a little longer, but the ability is originally related to the mental and physical state of the user. Lu Jun, who knew his condition, was obviously in an extremely unstable mental state, and the liquefaction time became shorter. Finally, with a puff, Lu Jun's whole body returned to its original appearance, but the next moment, black venom gushed out of his body, and he knelt on the ground in an instant, completely dead. A powerful ability user died just like that, and everyone present was a little sighing. Lu Jun's liquefaction is a very powerful and invincible ability in some ways, but he was killed so easily. Lei Jiao was very emotional and understood. Lu Jun relied too much on his liquefaction ability and always allowed others to attack him, which led to this day. Unlike Lu Jun, Lei Jiao's most taboo thing since he had super speed was to be attacked. Dodge, this is his means of dealing with almost all attacks. Speed is his life, and before he knows the opponent's ability, he will never let the opponent's attack hit him. So staying alert at all times and being ready to dodge attacks anytime and anywhere is also his way to save his life. This time, this way to save his life saved him again. Countless blood thorns shot out from Kano's body, piercing Lei Jiao's body in the first place. However, 1 second later, his body gradually dissipated. It was Lei Jiao's afterimage, and he himself had appeared in front of Fang Qi. "What's going on?" Fang Qi asked. "He is resurrected, and blood keeps shooting out of his body. I saw that blood kept turning into thorns and drilling out of Kano's body. His whole body seemed to have turned into a bloody thorn monster, and the blood thorns shot at Zhengji, Lu Xian, Fang Yang, and Lu Jun on the ground, dragging them over." "Stop him quickly!" Jennifer watched Lu Xian's body being fused into the monster's body, and exclaimed, "He is recovering from his injuries by devouring corpses. Stop him immediately, otherwise he will be resurrected again." Before Jennifer finished speaking, Lei Jiao had already moved, and countless afterimages appeared around the monster, cutting off his blood thorns one by one. This guy's ability far exceeds Wang Song's performance. Jennifer's eyes were filled with countless data like a waterfall. She looked at the monster shooting blood thorns continuously, attacking Lei Jiao while grabbing corpses, revealing a color of fear. The original Wang Song could only shoot blood bullets, and in order to avoid excessive bleeding and fear of too many wounds, he only shot a little blood from his fingers. And Kano in front of him not only sprinkled his blood like a fountain, but also turned blood into blood thorns and shot them out. He can not only obtain other people's abilities, but also deeply develop other people's abilities, even surpassing the original user. And his body structure is completely different from that of ordinary humans. At least normal humans can never live like this, and can use all the blood in their bodies as weapons. Even if it is Wang Song, if he does this, the first person to die is himself. Although the speed of Lei Jiao is very fast, there are too many blood thorns. After Kano eats a corpse, the speed of blood thorns is faster and the number is more. Even the wounds on his body began to heal faster. Jennifer immediately said to the cyborg, "Hurry up and help Lei Jiao, otherwise we will all die." The cyborg hesitated and said, "But I need to protect you." "I don't need protection, go and kill him, otherwise not only us, but the entire Emerald City will probably be doomed. Once this monster eats all of us, I'm afraid that Daxialonke will not be able to do anything to him." The cyborg nodded and rushed forward. But after just a few steps, he stopped. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xiong Lango. Chapter 57. I saw that one of Kano's arms was cut off by the Thunder Dragon, but then some blood vessels, muscles, and other things grabbed his arm and raised it to the sky. Then circles of flames and air sprayed out from his exposed trachea and gathered on his palm. It was the ability of air explosion and flame jet. The 4 heavenly kings had used the explosion he produced to stop Fang Qi before. But now it was used by Kano, and the power was far beyond before. Heart-pounding fluctuations came from Kano's palm, and it seemed that it would explode at any time and anywhere, so the Thunder Dragon ignored him and rushed to Fang Qi, wanting to take Fang Qi away first. He still didn't realize the threat of the monster in front of him like Jennifer. But a ball of black mind energy blocked him in front of him. It was not until this time that Kano used the mind energy that he had been hiding. If he had been using mind energy to protect his body just now, I am afraid that the Thunder Dragon would not be able to plot against him. The effect of mind energy was also very significant. Although the Thunder Dragon dodged at the first time, he also lost the opportunity to save Fang Qi. In Kano's palm, the air and flames were constantly compressed, and it looked like a small sun that was dazzling. The black terrifying spirit also emerged from his body, covering Kano's body. When Lei Jiao returned and chopped him, the spirit was like countless layers of cloth stacked together, making it difficult for him to penetrate. Level 4 ability user, Lei Jiao said in horror. When Kano used the bomb in his hand to force Lei Jiao away, and then used the black spirit to stop him from coming back, the bloodthorn did not stop working. Kano also seized the time and finally caught all the corpses in front of him, and merged them with his own body in one go. The black spirit rushed into the sky, and the fire in Kano's hand became brighter and brighter. With a strong wave of his arm, the fire had been thrown out of the window. The new body has been completed, and he no longer needs a fireball to force Lei Jiao back. The horrifying explosion sounded from midair, causing countless people to exclaim, and the shock wave caused by the explosion immediately swept the entire reception room. The hurricane was raging, but none of the living people present paid attention to the explosion. Except for Fang Qi, who was injured in the eye, everyone stared closely at the blood and flesh of several corpses. A brand new human body crawled out of the blood and flesh. A strong body over 2 meters long, with marble-like muscles, thicker black horns on the head, and a slender tail at the end of the coccyx. The new Kano appeared in front of everyone again like a demon. But he didn't look at anyone. Instead, he focused his eyes on his clenched fist. Blood drops squeezed out of the skin of the fist and covered the entire fist. Lei Jiao and Jennifer looked at Kano in doubt, not knowing what he was going to do. They could only feel that Kano seemed to become more terrifying and more evil after absorbing 4 corpses. The black mind that soared into the sky was like the flames of hell, making people dare not look directly at it. After the blood covered his fist, it turned into blood-colored armor. Then Kano shook his arm, and rows of blood-colored punctures appeared on the armor. Then his arm suddenly became red-hot, and the blood was vaporized, and then disappeared without a trace. Kano's arm turned into liquid again. After a burst of air explosion, the liquefied arm burst into countless water droplets in the air. After a few seconds, all the water droplets gathered back to his arm, and he grew another arm. Everyone stared at Kano in amazement, not knowing what to say. The power of Kano in front of them was beyond their imagination. In addition to the ability to liquefy and control blood, he also had the ability to control his body and regenerate super quickly. No one on the scene could defeat him. But at this desperate moment, a voice came from the broken window. "Finally found you, Kano." Time went back to 30 minutes ago. Li Anping ran along the highway like a breeze. Every time he passed a ramp, he would stop and carefully distinguish the smell in the air, but until now, the smell of Kano has continued to the front. Suddenly, the highway ahead began to be jammed, and all the cars stopped and did not move. Li Anping also slowed down in confusion. He quietly entered the highway and walked forward like an ordinary driver getting out of a car. "What's going on? Why is there such a jam ahead?" "I don't know, it seems that there was a big car accident, and more than a dozen cars collided with each other." Li Anping's sensitive hearing allows him to collect information effortlessly. Hearing that there was a car accident ahead, he instinctively felt that it was related to Kano who had passed by before. After jogging for a kilometer, he finally saw the scene of the car accident. The police had not arrived yet, and there were crowds of onlookers everywhere. More than a dozen cars rear-ended each other, and the scene was more tragic than expected. The cries of children and women were heard, and there were figures calling for help everywhere. Some people had broken bones, some had their hands cut off, and some had their heads knocked unconscious. This was still considered good. The worst ones were those whose bodies were directly shredded and torn into pieces. It was a horrible sight. Li Anping walked all the way to the front car, which was a sedan and the culprit of the car chain collision. The driver of the car had fallen to the ground with blood all over his head and was no longer breathing. The front half of the car had been completely deformed, like a ball of mud being squeezed together, but Li Anping could still see a pair of footprints on the hood, leaving a dent of more than an inch. Li Anping smelled the other party's unique smell and gritted his teeth to pronounce the name. Then he turned his head and walked towards the scene of the car accident. "What are you going to do? Are you not going to chase him?" Hurry up and catch up and eat him, He said anxiously. I have to save people first, Li Anping said as he lifted up an overturned truck and pulled out the injured inside. Stupid, you are dawdling here. What if he escapes? You must catch up and eat him quickly. Li Anping was unmoved and just continued to save people. He was fast, strong, and had good hearing enough to hear the survivors' cries for help and even heartbeats. He would first save those who were in the most danger. Once again, Li Anping tore open the door of a van and rescued the trapped family of 3. In the face of others' thanks, he said nothing, just silently saving people. Some people who were not injured or whose cars were blocked behind saw Li Anping doing this, and exclaimed, as if they were surprised by his strength. Some people took out their mobile phones to take pictures, and some people called the police. Several men stood up and followed Li Anping to rescue people and carry the wounded with him. Such action seemed to slowly calm Li Anping's anxiety, and the desire to eat Kano seemed to have weakened a little. Kano, what has become? Why can I feel his presence, feel his smell? Why is he so powerful? Why are there traces of eating people at the entrance of the cave? Hey, tell me. Li Anping looked at the police car coming in the distance, refused everyone's thanks, and silently withdrew from the crowd. He ran directly on the highway. This time he was faster, and he didn't worry about showing his strength in front of ordinary people. A driver only saw a black shadow passing by, and then saw a man in the distance running faster than him. He blinked his eyes, and when he looked again, he found that the man had disappeared. Not only him, countless people on the highway that day saw this magical scene. Hey, whether Kano has become the same existence as me, answer me. Li Anping didn't care about these, he just asked Hey again. After a while of silence, Hey slowly said, my memory is a little incomplete, and for many things, I can only answer some of what I know and tell you. Go on. First of all, he is absolutely different from you. My ability is unique, so yours is the same. He is just a test product at most. Hey continued, humans, you are not alone. There are more than one intelligent life on this planet, and Kano is their masterpiece. What do you mean? Tell me clearly. Hearing what He said, Li Anping was shocked. I only remember this much, Li Anping. If you want to know more, then become stronger. Only with enough power can you be qualified to know the truth of the world. After saying this, He kept silent. No matter how much Li Anping asked, he would not say more. After hearing this, Li Anping felt even more confused. But he knew that he was helpless now. The most important thing at the moment was to find Kano. Whether it was the bloody murders of the lone wolf or the brutality of Kano, Li Anping had 1,010,000 reasons to kill him. The anger burned in his heart all the time. It would burst out with infinite power if it needed an opportunity. Suddenly, Li Anping's eyes condensed and looked at the toll gate of the highway in front of him. A sports car was queuing up to pay the toll. It was the sports car that Li Anping originally drove to Heilongjian. He moved his feet and appeared in front of the car. Looking at Suomi and the 2 people in the car, he frowned and said, where are the Kano people? The smell of Kano was not emitted by these 2 people. Suomi and Bezos panicked when they heard what Li Anping said. At Suomi's signal, Bezos spit out a large wave of mucus from his mouth. The mucus secreted from his mouth can stick anything together, and it is also a means of trapping the enemy that is not easy to attract the attention of ordinary people. But the next moment, Suomi knew that they were wrong, and they were wrong, outrageously wrong. The mucus didn't hit Li Anping at all. Then amazing power burst out from Li Anping. Suomi's superior physical fitness made him the first to react, but he didn't even have time to move. And Bezos, he didn't even react to the opponent's attack. Bezos widened his eyes and vaguely felt that something seemed to hit his chest. Then a force burst out from his chest. In his eyes, the whole world seemed to be going backwards. His body passed through the windshield of the sports car, through the railings, and across hundreds of meters. Bezos flew into the air, and his terrified expression had not even fully formed, twisting into a ball in the squeeze of the wind. The next moment, Li Enping appeared in front of him again. Time seemed to slow down at this moment. A hand slowly pressed on his head while he was stunned. Boom! Bezos flew from oblique upwards to vertically downwards and hit the ground. A huge air wave appeared between him and Li Enping. When Suomi opened the car door, he could only see that Bezos had turned into a pool of rotten meat, and his entire head was hit into the chest cavity. At this time, Li Enping in mid-air slowly retracted his palm and turned to look at him. Ah! At this time, Bezos's last scream sounded in his ears. Suomi's face turned pale and he couldn't help swallowing his saliva. His companion was beaten into a meat paste in front of him, but he didn't even have the courage to transform into a beast. The gap is really too big. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, SpecialAbilities. Chapter 58. Under Suomi's horrified eyes, Li Enping slowly walked up to him. Where is Kano? I don't know. He's crazy. He said he wanted to conquer Violet, Kylan Group, and Zhongai Hall. He will go first and give us the signal. With a bang, Li Enping smashed Suomi's head. Absorbed the opponent's soul. After killing these two people, his physical fitness improved again, becoming strength 4.1, speed 3.0, and physical fitness 4.6. It seems that these two people are much stronger than they let on. Especially the second person killed by Li Enping was as powerful as Zhang Chuan, who Li Enping killed on the building. But they still don't know Kano's exact location. So Li Enping could only sniff his nose again. Fortunately, Kano also walked along the highway. Although some time had passed, Li Enping could still smell him. At this moment, a sound from the radio reached his ears. It was the sound of a radio broadcast from a certain car. Temporarily interrupting a message, 1st Avenue to 3rd Avenue have been completely blocked by the police. According to official sources, this was a joint performance by the SWAT team and the fire brigade, but citizens heard unexplained explosions and exchanges of fire at the scene. The specific reason is our reporter. Li Enping suddenly squatted down, and an overwhelming force gathered and brewed under his feet. Then he jumped hard, and his whole body brought up a wave of white air, flying in the direction of Kano. Wherever he passed, there was a huge sound of breaking through the air, making people think that it was a fighter plane passing through the air. He didn't start to fall slowly until he was 1 kilometer away. Time goes back to just now. In the building, Dongman opened his eyes wide and looked at the situation in the living room in disbelief. The combat power and ability displayed by Kano were too appalling. This was a terrifying ability that had never appeared in the entire history of mankind. Big news. Big news. How much money can this information be exchanged for? Dongman's mind was filled with such an idea. I don't know how many people in the world would be interested in Kano's ability. Not only the great Xiaolonke, but also the southern countries, and even the Flame Dragon Pioneer of the north, and the Shadow of the east. The core, as well as the countries in the western continent, all major forces will swarm in like sharks smelling blood. And the Kano in front of him is obviously not someone who is at the mercy of others. Judging from the abilities he has shown, he may become stronger as he fights. Become a truly invincible existence. Thinking of this, Dongman suddenly shuddered. If this kind of monster that absorbs abilities by eating people became the strongest, people with abilities like him would be in danger. Should we report it to the Emerald City's special service team immediately? While Dongman was thinking wildly, a loud shout came from the window. Finally found you, Kano. Who is this person? So reckless. Thinking of this, Dongman turned the telescope to the place where the sound came from, and saw Li Enping running among high-rise buildings, heading towards Kano's direction. Is it him? Dongman recognized Li Enping. He was the person who asked him about the lone wolf a few days ago. He also suspected that the lone wolf was wiped out in the past few days had something to do with him. A little surprised at the opponent's strength. A promising young man with a strength between Lu Jun and the four heavenly kings. Dong Man thought so. But he doesn't think the appearance of Li Enping can change anything. Although he usually complains about the tyranny of the three major forces, it doesn't matter whether he wants to admit it or not. Zhonggai Hall, Violet, and Kylan Group are indeed very powerful. Especially just now, whether it was Fang Qi's bravery and proficiency in fighting, Lu Jun, the four heavenly kings' strange abilities, or Lei Jiao's unparalleled speed, and Zi Lulin's high technology of transforming people. They can all be said to be top warriors among ability users. But even such a character could not last more than a few minutes in front of the monster Kano, and was burst like a bubble. At this time, Kano has become a demon king level existence in Dongman's heart. I am afraid that only Daxia Longke and Yanlong Pioneer, masters from national organizations, can fight against it. Dongman even vaguely estimated that even Han Wei and Mo Kaiyan of the Emerald City Special Service Team might not be Kano's opponent at this time. He didn't know that Mo Kaiyan had been killed, otherwise his suspicion would be further confirmed. Seeing Li Enping rushing towards the living room, Dongman just shook his head and said, "Fool." He didn't know that Li Enping was a monster whose combat effectiveness could not be measured by ability level. His true combat power has long exceeded the so-called first level. This idiot. At the same time, in another building, Han Wei looked at Li Enping, who suddenly appeared and also cursed. Who does he think he is? Han Wei slammed the walkie-talkie in his hand to the ground and said angrily, "He rushed over alone. He thought he was a fifth-level ability user? Being eaten by Kano will only increase the number of people. The strength of the other party, this idiot." The subordinate on the side said boldly, "He probably doesn't know Kano's ability yet." Who would have thought that as soon as he spoke, Han Wei started to curse, "Didn't I tell you to seal off the scene and not allow anyone to enter? How did he rush in? A bunch of trash. He's too fast." The man continued to say, but was quickly stopped by his colleagues around him. Han Wei cursed a few more times, then picked up the walkie-talkie and began to assign tasks. All ability users should stay back and do not engage in close combat. Snipers are in position. Firemen, pay attention to suppression and take out all the rockets. The third team will bring the liquid nitrogen over and freeze him for me when the time comes. One person asked, "What about Fang Qi, Jennifer, and Li Enping?" "I'll give them hell," Han Wei roared, "then call me, notify the people in Tianjing, and send me the video data just now." And halfway through his words, his eyes suddenly opened wide and his breathing became rapid. It was as if someone had grabbed his neck and he couldn't say a single word. He stared blankly at the impact on the screen, seemingly stunned. "How is that possible? Are you Kano?" Li Enping stood at the window, glanced at the entire living room, and finally focused on the demonic Kano. "Who are you?" For some reason, Kano felt that there seemed to be a smell he didn't like on the other person's body. Jennifer on the side shouted to Li Enping, "Escape quickly and inform the special service team. This guy can absorb the abilities of people with abilities. Don't fight him head on." Li Enping glanced at her, as if he hadn't heard her, and turned to look at Kano again. "Lone Wolf, you organized it, right? Were you the one who did those girls in the cave in Black Dragon Mountain?" Jennifer said angrily, "You idiot, can't you hear what people say? Lu Jun and the four heavenly kings have been killed. Get out of here quickly. Go and notify the special service team." No one paid any attention to her. Even Fang Qi was whispering something to Lei Xiao, not knowing what his plans were. However, their words were heard clearly by Li Enping. "Jennifer is protected by the cyborg. I will throw the newly arrived man out as bait. Let's take the opportunity to escape." Damn it, Fang Qi covered his eyes with an angry look on his face, and finally had to agree to Lei Xiao. Although they don't want to admit it, Kano in front of them is indeed far beyond the level they can deal with. The right thing to do is to take advantage of the opponent's opportunity to devour others and escape to save your life. Li Anping ignored them. He just looked at Kano, and Kano was also the most careless person present. He laughed loudly. Why are you here to seek revenge? Oh, by the way, I remembered it. Right, Ye Wenbin told me, are you the man who has killed many of his men these days? Very good. Kano stuck out his tongue and licked his lips. Then you should also be an ability user. Unfortunately, you are so unlucky that you came at the wrong time. Li Anping ignored Kano's provocation and didn't even say a word. After going through many twists and turns, he finally found the scum in front of him. Whether it was the lone wolf's human trafficking or his own brutal behavior, Li Anping wanted to tear Kano into pieces. The anger in his body boiled instantly, and all the strength in his body was poured out. In the living room, no one reacted, except for the high-speed thunder dragon. But even he could barely see a blurry figure sprinting. Then the figure bumped into Kano's body. Only then did the wind hit Thunder Dragon's face, blowing his clothes loudly. Then there was a loud bang, and the entire floor of the hall broke and collapsed in an instant, forming a hole big enough to place a truck. Kano and the figure had disappeared. There was another series of crashes. The two of them crashed through 5 floors in a row, and in the midst of the whirlwind, Kano didn't even react to what happened. He just felt a huge, irresistible force pressing on his body, wrapping him up and hitting him hard on the floor. Li Anping, who was furious, didn't even know what it meant to hold back, and he didn't even think of the power to do it with all his strength. But not enough. Not enough, not enough, not enough. Roaring, Li Anping transformed into a giant more than 2 meters tall, and then punched Kano hard in the face. Unstoppable and irresistible. Kano's face was squeezed into a ball in a few tenths of a second, and then because of the residual power of the punch, the huge kinetic energy in his head dragged him out, through the glass window, and flew into the air. Before it was over, Li Anping flashed into the air almost simultaneously like a death-seeking god. Then he grabbed Kano's deformed head and swung his arm. Kano crashed into the ground like a meteor. Boom! The shock wave visible to the naked eye swept away. The strong wind hit Kano. The first thing that hit Kano was his head, which exploded like a watermelon. Then his neck, torso, and legs. His originally perfect body was squeezed together by the huge force and turned into meat paste in an instant. Until this moment, Kano's entire thinking was still confused. However, under instinctive reaction, he still began to heal himself quickly. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xiong Go. Chapter 59. Kano's self-healing ability has existed since he gained the ability, but it was very weak at that time and could only heal minor injuries. It was not until he ate the first person that this ability gradually strengthened. Now, after devouring multiple people with abilities, his self-healing ability has been enhanced to an exaggerated degree. In the meat paste, he was like a demon crawling out of flesh and blood. In almost a few seconds, Kano, who had turned into meat paste, had returned to normal. Even the epidermis was still full of tender red. You are dead, Kano said angrily to Li Anping, who was walking slowly. I will cut off your meat piece by piece and eat it in front of you. Ah! Li Anping flashed in front of Kano and slapped him in the face, bending Kano's neck 90 degrees directly. He spun and flew out. Crashed into a wall. Ah! Kano crawled out of the rubble, his eyes were red, and he looked at Li Anping murderously. Very good, you have the ability to heal yourself, which is really good. Li Enping looked at Kano, who slowly got up from the ground, staring at him with a pair of eyes, and looked at Kano, who twisted his head back with both hands and recovered from his injuries in an instant, and he clenched his fists. You have two news. The good news is that I am afraid I can't kill you in one go. Li Enping looked at Kano with a ferocious face. All the muscles in his body were tense, and endless malice rushed towards him. Even Kano was shocked. The bad news is that I will torture you to death. Boom. Li Enping rushed up again, but this time, what came into view was endless water. In the living room, Lei Xiao, Jennifer, and others ran to the window and looked at the two people on the street with shocked eyes. Who is this person? This kind of power, and this speed, I have never seen it before, Jennifer said in a hoarse voice. The confidence of the head of the Violet branch disappeared after encountering two monsters, Li Enping and Kano, in one day. Lei Jiao and Fang Qi were silent. The man's mental energy was incredibly weak, but on the contrary, his physical strength was terrifyingly strong. Whether it was Fang Qi after the transformation, the cyborg, or Kano, they were far inferior. This was because Li Enping's combat power could not be measured by the ability level, which led to their judgment errors. Lei Jiao slowly said, although mental energy is mainly used in close combat and defense in the battle of ability users, the quantity and quality of mental energy can be regarded as a direct reflection of the strength of an ability user. But it's a complete monster. I have never heard of someone showing such a strong combat power when the ability level is so low. Lei Jiao remembered that he was still planning to attack him just now. It was a close call. Fang Qi still didn't speak, but he was not without reaction when listening to Lei Jiao's narration. From his twisted eyebrows, it can be seen that he was not calm inside. Han Wei and Dong Man were even more shocked. But in the eyes of everyone, Kano finally used his ability. Almost at the moment when Li Enping rushed up, he had already completed the liquefaction of his whole body. He was no longer a 3-meter-tall water man like Lu Jun. Instead, he turned into a surging wave, and with the momentum of drowning the entire street, he smashed towards Li Enping fiercely. Ha 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 ha, this is my ability. I am invincible with a variety of abilities. What's the use of your strength? Can you kill water? Can you kill the Yangtze River? Li Enping pursed his lips and said nothing. He just punched the waves that were coming towards him. Thunderous explosions sounded, and the huge force smashed down, and the waves were blown into pieces. But the next moment, they gathered together and continued to rush towards Li Enping. Although the water waves that Kano has now turned into cannot be called the Yangtze River, it is obviously not something that Li Enping can easily break. Even if Li Enping's strength is strong enough, and even a punch can break the waves, it will not cause any harm to Kano. After only a few seconds of delay, the waves still hit Li Enping, then turned into a water tornado that wrapped up Li Enping's body, and finally turned into a water ball, locking Li Enping up like a water prison. Li Enping felt as if he was sealed in the deep water of the swimming pool, and his limbs could not touch the ground. No matter how he swam, the surrounding water prison would follow him closely. He punched hard, and the water surged in the water ball, but when it reached the surface of the water ball, it only burst into a ball of water, and then the splashed water seemed to have spirits, slowly crawling back and gathering again in the water ball. After a few more punches, he already felt a little difficult to breathe. And outside the water ball, a liquefied Kano head came out, laughing wantonly. Idiot, do you think it's useful to hit the water with your fist? Struggle, the more you move, the faster you will die in the water. But don't worry, I won't let you die so easily. I will torture you slowly and eat you carefully bit by bit. I will never put your life in any danger. After saying that, Kano looked at Li Enping's motionless appearance and laughed at him wantonly for a while. Then his head disappeared into the clear water again. And in the water ball, a black spot appeared out of nothing and began to spread gradually. The eyelids of the onlookers all jumped. They were very familiar with the scene in front of them. It was the method Kano used to kill Lu Jun: spread the poison to the opponent's body. Poison the enemy to death. Originally, this was used by Kano, who was trapped in the water, to kill Lu Jun, who had turned into a water man. However, here, the same person was killed, but the person who was trapped was no longer the trapper. He doesn't know this ability. Looking at Li Anping's unaware appearance, Jennifer had this thought in her mind, but just as she was about to remind him, the black toxin seemed to know his thoughts and instantly multiplied by dozens or hundreds of times, covering most of the water ball and wrapping up Li Anping completely. It's over, he's dead. Everyone present had this thought. Kano was no exception. He was delighted when he saw this. The opponent's physical strength had always frightened him, but it also aroused his greed. He couldn't wait to eat the opponent and gain Li Anping's ability. But he could only resist the opponent's physical attack by turning into a water man. This virus will only make people's limbs weak, their internal organs fail, and their flesh gradually rot. It won't kill him all at once, but it will make him gradually lose his fighting power. He, I will enjoy you. In a blink of an eye, the black poison had covered the entire water ball. Kano waited for more than 10 seconds before withdrawing the water ball, turning back into a human form and standing in front of Li Anping. As soon as the water ball disappeared, Li Anping fell from midair and stood on the ground. But his body was completely covered with a layer of dark mucus, emitting a fishy smell. He lowered his head and looked at his body motionlessly, not knowing what he was thinking. Kano walked in front of him and sneered, "Do you feel that your body is powerless?" He circled around Li Anping, looking at him greedily. "I said I wouldn't let you die so easily. I will bite off your flesh bit by bit." Kano walked back to Li Anping, looked into his eyes face to face and said, "If you cry and beg me now, I might give you a quick death." Li Anping looked at Kano with mockery in his eyes. "Are you an idiot?" The next moment, Kano's face changed drastically. Li Anping's palm was already on his face. He grabbed him and punched him through the chest. Unfortunately, Li Anping only felt that his palm passed through a layer of water curtain. Kano's reaction was very fast this time. He liquefied again as soon as he felt that something was wrong. It may also be that he was scared by Li Anping when he was in human form just now. Kano, who turned into a water man, wrapped up Li Anping in front of him again, but this time Li Anping's reaction was also very fast. Before being wrapped up again, he kicked his feet hard and broke through the water curtain and appeared 10 meters away. Then he jumped again and retreated more than 50 meters. He looked at Kano with a covetous look. "Why? Why doesn't the toxin work on you?" Kano, who turned into a water man, was no longer afraid of Li Anping's attack and couldn't help asking. Li Anping sneered and didn't answer. He just shook his body. He saw that the mucus covering his epidermis was like dry straw paper, and all of it was shaken off by him. Of course he wouldn't tell Kano the reason. The virus also depends on who it is used on. With his 4.6 physique, ordinary viruses can't do anything to him. Seeing that Li Anping didn't answer, Kano cursed a few words manically, and then rushed up. His whole body turned into a water dragon, and rushed towards Li Anping from top to bottom. But Li Anping's speed was faster than him, and now he was fully prepared to prevent him from getting involved, so how could Kano succeed? He easily dodged the impact of the water dragon. He also hit the water dragon's head with a backhand hammer, smashing it to pieces. Roar! The angry water dragon regrouped, opened its mouth, and a large beam of flames sprayed towards Li Anping. The violent flames were much more powerful than when Zhengji used them before. Before the flames shot into Li Anping's face, his hair was already burnt yellow. Facing the surging flames, Li Anping did not dodge or evade. He shouted loudly and exhaled a long breath. With his huge lung capacity and monster-like physical fitness, Li Anping's breath was like a strong wind, which actually blew the flames away, dispersing most of them, and even some of them rolled back, turning part of the water dragon's body into water vapor. Li Enping looked at the water dragon's body that had shrunk a circle, and his eyes lit up. He seemed to have thought of something. But the next moment, there was an explosion in the air, which happened directly in front of him. It was the superpower of the air bomb. Li Enping resisted the attack on the spot, but it also gave Kano the opportunity to use this ability. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, SpecialAbilities. Chapter 60. The explosion happened right in front of Li Enping. He didn't even have time to dodge. He just endured it. The shock wave swept through his body, and a stream of blood spurted out. He vomited a mouthful of blood, and even some internal organs were mixed in. The internal organs are always the weakness of the human body. Even a strong person like Li Enping cannot overcome it. And the explosion just now obviously caused him internal injuries. Most of the internal organs in his body were ruptured. Ordinary people would probably have died long ago. Kano obviously would not miss this opportunity. In a wild laugh, the water dragon had already rushed over and shook its tail to roll towards Li Enping's body. However, what greeted him was a straightforward punch without any fancy moves. The power of this punch was not reduced at all compared to the previous one. It directly smashed the water dragon's tail. When the water dragon regrouped and rushed forward again, Li Enping had already dodged. Whether it was speed or strength, there was no decrease at all, and there was no sign of injury at all. Li Enping also has the ability to heal himself. Although his self-healing depends on swallowing souls, the number is limited. Before the battle, he still had 30 souls, and the explosion damage just now consumed 5 souls. However, Kano didn't know that when he saw Li Enping's lively appearance, a trace of fear flashed in his eyes. The man in front of him was stronger than he thought. But he didn't think he would lose. Whether it was his self-healing ability or his ability to devour abilities, it showed how powerful he was. If the explosion didn't work, then try another one. Kano rushed up again, but the difference was that this time there were bubbles coming out of the water dragon's body, and the entire liquefied body looked like it was boiling. Before getting close, you could feel a heat coming towards you. This is Mo Kyuyan's ability to control body temperature, which is now used by Kano and combined with the liquefaction of the body. It is equivalent to turning the body into boiling water at 100 degrees. It's not that Kano doesn't want to increase the temperature, but the boiling point of water is 100 degrees. If it's higher, he will evaporate. Li Enping's face was solemn. This time when he saw the water dragon rushing over, he didn't fight back, but kept retreating. It's not that he didn't want to fight back, but the water dragon in front of him was covered with boiling water. He punched it, and Kano only needed to regroup his body, but he was burned. Even if he was accidentally entangled, he would be boiled in boiling water at 100 degrees. The threat was much greater than his venom attack just now. So the field suddenly fell into a stalemate, and Kano became a boiling water dragon, chasing Li Enping. But Li Enping was faster than him, and he couldn't catch up. But Li Enping couldn't attack, and the water dragon chasing behind him couldn't do anything. On the road, there were constant loud noises. Li Enping was fine, just dodging the water dragon's attack, but Kano's water dragon didn't have any scruples. With a few sweeps of his tail, he overturned the car parked on the side of the road. Following Li Enping into the store on the first floor of the building and then coming out again, I don't know how many walls and counters were damaged. Fortunately, the people nearby were dispersed by the police before. It was originally to prevent the competition of the 3 fire powers from hurting innocent people. Now it has reduced Kano's killing. In the office, Hanwei looked at Li Enping who was jumping up and down to avoid Kano's attack, and suddenly sneered. I see, so, Qiu Yan has also sacrificed. A subordinate beside him said anxiously, Captain, What should we do? Do you want us to help him? Help? What can you help with? Hanwei scolded. After liquefaction, ordinary light weapons can't do anything to him. Flamethrowers, liquid nitrogen, rockets, he has the ability to restrain. What about electric shock? There are high voltage wires nearby. Someone suggested. Who will wrap the high voltage wires around this monster? Do you go or do I? Jet flames, air bombs, and venom, can you stop it? Or do you expect him to get in by himself? Look, during the argument, one person suddenly shouted. Hanwei immediately turned his head to look in the direction of Li Anping and exclaimed, is he going to die? During the chase and escape, Kano kept roaring, the ground was smashed, cars and shops were destroyed by his brute force, and everywhere he passed was a mess. While rushing around, he kept yelling at Li Anping. Boy! Aren't you going to kill me? Aren't you going to wipe out the lone wolf? Why did you run away? Ha 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 ha, the women in your Daxia are very durable, and their skin is better than ours, and they are easy to train. Every time I catch them, as long as they sleep for a few times and get a few injections, they will be more obedient than the other. Boy, do you know how fun the women I sent to the cave are? They kept begging me, serving me, and wanted me to let them go. Each one is more cheap than a sow. When I kill you, I will rebuild the lone wolf and expand its scale 10-fold, 100-fold, and I will make all the women in Daxia kneel at my feet. Kano wanted to continue scolding, but suddenly stopped. He saw Li Anping, who had been fleeing all the way, suddenly turned around and looked at the rushing water dragon face to face. Ha ha ha, kid, you finally stopped running, Kano said happily, knocking aside a large truck and rushing over, I'm going to cook you and eat you. With a bang, his voice stopped abruptly, and he punched the water dragon's head, smashing his upper body into pieces. However, the streams of boiling water immediately gathered again, trying to transform into a dragon. But just as he was transforming, another fist hit his face, breaking the water dragon again. Roar! Kano roared angrily. No one knew how he roared after his body liquefied and turned into a water dragon. Anyway, he was beaten apart by another punch halfway through his roar. Boom! 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 Li Anping punched Kano's liquefied body one after another like a pile driver. As long as the opponent had a little bit of that part to gather, he would punch him and make the water ball explode and turn into countless water droplets. Li Anping's fists were blood-stained, the surface layer of skin had rotted, and the muscles and nerves inside were also severely burned. However, while being hurt, the devoured soul also began to heal his injuries. As for the body not being able to gather, Kano was not anxious at all. Watching Li Anping constantly smashing his body, he just sneered in his heart. Is it useful? No matter how many times it is broken, this liquefied body can be restored to its original state. It can gather or disperse. This is the characteristic of water. Idiot, he defined Li Anping in his heart. Human power is limited, and he didn't believe that Li Anping could keep fighting like this. But the sneer soon turned into anxiety, and then into fear. Li Anping fought for more than 20 minutes. Kano didn't even have a chance to take shape. How is it possible? Isn't he tired? Doesn't his hands hurt? There is a time limit for body liquefaction. A person, or a carbon-based creature, cannot be a water-like existence for a lifetime. If the liquefaction is not lifted after the time limit, then the ability user will become water forever, real water, lose consciousness, and lose his soul. Although Kano's ability is much stronger than Lu Jun, he cannot get rid of the limitations of this ability. The time for his liquefaction is coming. But now his body is torn into pieces and turned into a mass of water. At this time, he will transform. Is he going to die as a pool of clear water? Or transform into a human form to bear Li Anping's anger? He seems to have no choice. After barely gathering a small ball of water, Kano abandoned most of his body and finally turned into a human body again. He looked only about 1.45 meters tall, and because only part of his liquefied body could be restored, his entire body had shrunk by more than half compared to its original appearance. With a bang, Li Anping also threw a punch, and this punch finally hit Kano's body. A hole the size of a bowl was directly blasted out of Kano's chest, and his heart was instantly shattered. Li Anping's eyes condensed, and he immediately blasted at Kano's head again. Finally, before the energy for healing his hands was exhausted, he forced Kano out. How could he let go easily? Until this time, he still had the energy of 3 souls left. With a snap, Kano's head was blasted, and brain fluid splashed on Li Anping's face. He showed a grim smile and punched Kano's stomach again. Several blood thorns sprang out from his chest and stabbed towards Li Anping's eyes, but this speed was too slow for Li Anping. With a wave of his hand, the blood thorns were slapped away. The fist had already beaten Kano's intestines and stomach into a paste. Do you think I will give you a chance to breathe? Li Anping reached into Kano's body and grasped the opponent's spine. With a hiss, mixed with Kano's screams, Li Anping pulled out the opponent's spine. Kano's self-healing ability cannot be used when liquefied. This is the result of Li Anping's previous observation. No matter how he smashed Kano's liquefied body, the size of the water dragon did not change. But when the flame evaporated part of the water dragon, Kano's body became smaller, but never changed back. Li Anping understood 2 points in an instant. One is that Kano cannot control the gasified body, and the other is that after liquefaction, he no longer has the ability to heal himself, and cannot regenerate the gasified and lost parts. It's normal to think about it. The flesh and water are originally very different. The self-healing ability can heal the flesh, but it doesn't mean that he can also heal the liquefied flesh. At the same time, Jennifer, Lei Xiao, Han Wei, everyone looked at Li Anping stupidly. After pulling out Kano's spine, Li Anping still didn't stop. He punched Kano's broken body one by one. The roar of the pile driver made everyone pale. And Kano was no longer in human form. He looked like a pile of broken pieces of meat put together. From time to time, he stretched out a few blood thorns, or sprayed a few flames and venom to resist. But it was like a child resisting an adult. No one spoke, everyone just watched Li Anping punch Kano into a meat paste. The meat paste barely regenerated and gathered together, but it would be smashed to pieces by Li Anping again. Eat him, he shouted. He is immortal. Even if he turns into powder, he can be resurrected after recuperating for a period of time. Eat it. Only when you absorb it can you really kill him. You will become stronger. Closer to your ideal. He shouted wildly, eat him. Eat him. Eat him quickly. Under Hei's urging, Li Anping's eyes became redder and redder, like a clear ruby. Shut up, Li Anping shouted in a low voice, and reached out to the rotten meat that was squirming on the ground.